How high will XRP go by the end of 2025? And what price will XRP realistically hit by the end of this year? Already, people are expecting far higher prices, as currently the price is only $2.84, underperforming most people's expectations by this point in the year. XRP is known for having one of the strongest, most active communities of crypto investors in the entire market. And it's for this very reason we have so much BS in the space. So many price predictions that never come true or will keep you holding your bag well into the next bear market, still expecting a 1000x return when you could have already had boatloads of money sitting in your bank account because you knew exactly what to look for. Influencers and hype men take advantage of this community by consistently posting misinformation, or to simply build their audiences, they'll embellish a lot of information. And if you've been around long enough, you've seen this happen over and over. For example, Crypto Barbie is a well-known and a major influencer with over 100K followers on Twitter, or X, who back in July of 2024 posted, if XRP now follows the bull run of 2017, 100 XRP will be worth $10,000 by the end of 2024. In other words, they're stating that 100 XRP will be worth $100 each for a total of $10,000. Now, this is nice to note, the fact that it says if XRP follows the bull run of 2017. However, that's not really realistic. It was a completely different market back then, one of the only cryptos in the market. It wasn't fighting for a lot of liquidity, and it was a far smaller market, which means it's easier to move. It's sheer physics in mass. For example, it'd be easier to destroy Pluto than it would Jupiter. Jupiter's just far larger. It would require more nukes. Still, I wouldn't call this misinformation, but the point I'm trying to make is a lot of people might expect this because they are a well-known influencer, and so they'll hold for longer than they should because they expect XRP to hit $100. Or for example, here's another influencer with 92,000 followers who either knows they're lying or truly is that dull and hasn't pieced it together yet, stating that XRP would be $102 by the end of 2024, said an analyst. And this was posted in April 19th of 2024. These types of posts get tons of engagement. Fast forward to September 20th of this year, he stated that 100 XRP would be valued at $10,000 by October 1st. We're getting awfully close, and I'm telling you, XRP is nowhere near this price. He's posted this type of stuff over and over and over again, and actually a lot of people follow suit. Sometimes they will use more information or all sorts of key partnerships that there's a lot of conjecture around that is also not verified in order to get what? Engagement. Heck, even back in March 2nd, Trump tweeted that he would sign an executive order on digital assets, directing the presidential working group to move forward on a crypto strategic reserve that would include XRP, Solana, and ADA, and the price and market ate it up. It pumped so hard from a price of $2.18 all the way to $3 in a single day. And you think even the sitting president of the United States, coming in with one of the most powerful statements of all time, had the ability to change sentiment and drive real demand from institutions? Well, guess what? You would have been wrong, because the price pumped hard that day, but it literally lasted about a day. Over the upcoming week, that very same pump was used by major market makers and investors to sell into it, and the price not only retraced the entire move within a week, but then proceeded to dump another 46% to a new low of $1.60 before bottoming. So if that's not enough evidence to prove that the market doesn't tend to do what we expect and rarely what we would like, then my goal in the first portion of this video is to lay the groundwork by using some examples on XRP's price history and that of Bitcoin to see if cryptos that share similarities in terms of market size, anything that's over $100 billion in market cap, would experience similar situations as they mature as an asset class. Now, the first thing I want to dive into is the price of, or better yet, the market cap of Bitcoin relative to the rest of the market. So you can see that in the top 10 cryptos by market cap, these are just the largest cryptos that have gained the most traction, that have the most excitement or investment from market participants. Cardano is sitting at number 10 with $30 billion. And then from there, it just continues to climb. You can see Solana sitting at about $119 billion. Binance, $138 billion. XRP at number 4, right behind Tether at $170 billion. And XRP and Tether have been bouncing back and forth. When the whole market's down, money flows into Tether, which pumps that market cap. And then on the flip side, when everything starts to pump, XRP tends to outperform Tether as money flows out of Tether into things like XRP. XRP, now sitting at over $100 billion market cap, is just a very large crypto. And so it's going to be more difficult for anyone to double their money on an XRP potentially than, let's say, something like Render. Now, I'm not saying Render itself is going to outperform XRP. At the end of the day, nobody actually knows. But it's a lot easier to find another $2 billion to invest into Render, and it realistically doesn't require that much liquidity to pump a market cap by $2 billion if we're talking relative size, versus another $170 billion. Okay, so yes, a lot more billions would need to flow into XRP in order for this to double your money. So market caps do kind of matter. It's not that they're the end all be all. It's just an indicator that tells you this is the current size based on the bids and the asks. This is the fair price the market currently values it at. Now, someone could say, well, I know the future, and like Warren Buffett, this thing is extremely undervalued. But you do have to remember there are very few Warren Buffetts in the world, and there's millions upon millions of everyone else. Okay, nobody really knows where the price is going to go in the long term on virtually any of these cryptos. Anything can happen. And so when you take that perspective into account, then you say, well, then which cryptos are likely going to be around 5 to 10 years from now and are likely going to be far bigger than they are right now? Is it possible for me to at least 5x my money on something like XRP and see this thing hit maybe like a $700 to $800 billion market cap by the end of the year? We would need to see a lot more inflows, not just from ETFs and institutions, but also retailers, as a lot of people have not really been paying attention this market cycle. And I could prove that by looking at Google Trends, but we're not going to do that in this video. So you can see that the size of XRP is actually 10 times, actually more than 10 times smaller than that of Bitcoin. Bitcoin dominance is currently sitting at 58.5%. In other words, out of the $3.88 trillion in all of crypto, 58% of that is sitting in Bitcoin, which basically is telling you the market has already chose its winner. And you could say, well, you know, XRP is designed to do something else. I don't disagree. And maybe at one point in time, it could potentially outperform Bitcoin. But as I've seen things, I try to remain as realistic as possible and take the market for what it is and not what I want it to be. And you can see since September of 2022, Bitcoin dominance has risen quite heavily. Whenever Bitcoin dominance declines, that's because we're having an altcoin season. So even on the lows, Bitcoin has always been about 40% of market dominance. But this last entire bull market cycle, which we've experienced from the bottoms of November and December of 2022, January of 2023, the market actually bottomed out right around here. And as you can see, we've been putting a series of higher highs and higher lows in the market. Bitcoin already has gained 620% off those lows in a very short period of time. If we're talking relative to the majority of stock market gains, this is about a 3-year period where you would have earned an average of 200% per year. I'd call that a major bull market. It's just people in crypto tend to be impatient and they expect 1000x returns and be complaining when they see a 100% return in a single market year. XRP is literally no different. Off the lows in November of 2022, it took a while to really gain some traction, but then in last November of 2024, it exploded and we're still up 835%.